Hi, it's Rob Bowron, and welcome back to Sharp College Football. Tonight we're going to preview Penn State, who comes in projected at number 14 in the preseason projections. I'm Rob Bowron, the econometrician, chicken behind Bowron, an advanced stat system for college football. If you've tuned in before, skip ahead. And if not, this is going to be a preview from an advanced stats perspective. We're going to run through Penn State, looking at what their offense and defense were good at and not good at last season. We'll run through the schedule. And again, it's from an advanced stats perspective. So everything you see here is from Bowron, an advanced stats system that's built on the same data that's provided to the College Football Playoff Committee. I should say it's provided on the same raw data. It's not on the same summarized canned metrics. One of the things that differentiates it from some of the stats that are more commonly used, like yards per game or points per game, it controls for opponent, tempo, and field position, all of which are really important to control for in college football. If you think about the quality of opponents, it differs quite a bit in college football, much more than, say, pro football. Field position matters tremendously when you're grading out an offense or a defense, and then how many drives a team is getting, tempo, also matters quite a bit. The point is to try to isolate the teams that are actually good and actually not, and the units that are actually good and actually not, and what they're good at. If you are looking for a preview that gets deep into the depth chart, and wants to get into, which freshman, expects to contribute this season, you should go find your local beat writer. That person is probably doing a fantastic job covering your local team. And they'll be able to provide that. Like I said, this is going to be from an advanced stats perspective. And I think that is those are both useful lenses to look at football. That said, I'm excited. Let's talk some Penn State. So Penn State comes in projected at 14. James Franklin is your head coach. They were at number 9 last season, and 31 in 21. So they did improve considerably last year. Particularly on the offensive side of the football. They only sit at number 33 overall in coaching and development. Another good couple seasons, and that'll continue to improve. They're at 57 in Bill Connolly's returning production coming into the season. They have a decent amount coming back, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. They're number 13 overall in your 2-year rolling recruiting rankings. And I do want to point out that when I say recruiting, I am not using an average of a class ranking. That is not as predictive as the average of each recruit's ranking on the team. That tends to predict a little better. They were number 34 overall in special teams last season. They're going to need to improve that number. Special teams in college football, and I talk about this a lot, the most important factor in special teams in college football is place kicking. I know fans tend to remember punt returns, kickoff returns for touchdowns. Those things happen infrequently and somewhat randomly in college football. What matters most and what tends to differentiate good from bad is place kicking, because not all college kickers are good. It's not the NFL where you have really good kickers on every team, or nearly every team. College kickers can vary quite a bit. So having a very good college kicker makes a very big difference in your special team score. I think this Penn State team, they've sort of been, and to sort of now tie a little bit of a bow on what we've got with them on the overall picture. For the past couple seasons, it feels like they've been on the cusp, right? I mean, first Ohio State is their big, monster that they cannot slay, that they cannot get past. And then it turns out that Michigan, on a very, what seems like a very slow burn under Harbaugh, catches Ohio State while Ohio State's rebuilding their defense after a bad defensive coordinator hire. But Penn State has been a little lost in the wilderness since Joe Moorhead left. Now, the defense has been really good most years. And they were really good again last season. I mean, they've had back-to-back top 10 years on defense in beta rank, but the offense wandered in the wilderness a little bit. They've struggled. They hired Minnesota's offense coordinator Kirk Ciarrocca to try to come in and fix things, and he was really bad. In fact, he was really bad. he was really bad when he went back to Minnesota too. Yeah, he just sort of he caught lightning that 1 year at Minnesota. That didn't work out. They brought in Mike Yurcich, former Oklahoma State offensive coordinator. He was at Ohio State for a long time. Didn't call plays there, but spent some time at Ohio State. They did improve in his, and we'll get into what they really improved on. They really improved, and that's the sort of key for them. And unlike we talked about. Look, with Georgia hiring Mike Bobo, with Tommy Rees at Alabama, the chances that you're going to have some absolute juggernaut like Georgia was last season at the top of college football are a little bit reduced, right? I mean, you're not going to have, the 2019 LSU type numbers, the 2020 Alabama type numbers, Georgia the last 2 seasons for different reasons, defense in 21, offense in 22. You're not going to have somebody putting up those kind of numbers in all likelihood because Bobo is just not the kind of play caller that Monken was. And Rees might end up being the kind of play caller that O'Brien was, but O'Brien wasn't the play caller that Sarkisian was. That leaves a little bit of an opening. If those teams aren't going to be putting up gargantuan offensive numbers, it does leave it so that sort of teams that were, you might used to be able to say like if they had a good year, like they might be able to catch them. Penn State might be able to catch them. But what has to happen for them is one, the special teams have to be better. I mean, 34 overall is not going to get it done unless you have a really, really big offensive year. The defense is likely there. It's the offense. Like the offense has to improve again. Like, and they did. They made huge progress off of where they were 2 years ago. They need to get the offense into that top 10 around where their defense is likely going to finish out. If they do that, then you're likely talking about Penn State as a team that could challenge. Like, look, now Ohio State, Ryan Day could get his fastball back on the offensive side of the football. Jim Knowles is going to have that defense probably much more dialed in this year. And they weren't terrible last season. They made significant progress. They just weren't where the Buckeyes needed them. And the offense hasn't been, I mean, I don't want to say it's been on like a really downward trajectory since 19, but it's been on a bit of a downward trajectory since 19. Penn State could catch up, with the offense getting there. Is if Ohio State has the same kind of offense they had last season, and this, like the defense even gets into the top 10, then Penn State could catch them, and they might not even need to finish positive on turnovers in the game. They could catch Michigan, right? Like those two, like it puts them in the realm of where, against a Georgia, against an Alabama, maybe Alabama. We'll see with Tommy Rees. But against a Georgia, let's put Georgia out there as an example. Penn State, if the offense were to get into the top 5, and that's not unreasonable given where they finished last season, if that were to happen, Penn State, might only need to finish +1 on turnovers to hang with Georgia. That's a great, you got to feel like that's a really good win, I think, if you're Penn State. Anyway, let's run through the offense, the defense, and the schedule. Offensively, 21 overall last season in beta rank. I grade, and I always tell people this, you should too. You should grade Power 5 teams on a 1 to 65 scale, call it 1 to 69 with the new additions to the Power 5 this season, or whatever we're going to call it after this season. That, I think, gives a much more fair ranking. I think people think like, oh, it's a top 25, and they think of like the, all of the, 130 some teams that play college football. Yeah, but the group of 5 teams don't have anything near the resources. So Power 5 teams needed to be graded against themselves. If you do that kind of grading, Penn State, like this is a slightly better than average Power 5 offense last season. Like I said, Mike Yurcich is your offensive coordinator. Now they were at 70 overall 2 years ago. So this is huge improvement. This is massive improvement over where they were last year. 19 overall in drive efficiency. This is their best number. They did a really good job here. Relatively speaking, putting together long drives, sustaining plays. This is good play calling to be able to put together drives, be consistent, put points on the board. They need to improve a little bit at explosive drives, 28 overall. Need a little bit better at big plays. 33 overall in play efficiency. All of these are scaled, by the way, to the best, like whatever the best unit was in the country at this particular metric. Last season, it was almost all Georgia. Georgia had an incredible offense last year. So they were, roughly 78% as efficient at creating explosive plays as Georgia was, and roughly 75% as good as finishing drives as Georgia was. 33 in play efficiency. This is controlling for opponent field position, tempo, as well as controlling for explosives. Outside of explosives, they did a pretty good job, though it's something they could certainly improve on their yards per play. This is the least important of the core 4 beta rank metrics, though, so not the most important one to improve on. They could also improve on a negative drives. Too many 3 and outs, too many turnovers. This is something that, like, you improve here, you improve on drive efficiency, get a little more explosive. You might be talking about creeping into that top 10. 32 overall in effective rush, 28 in effective pass. No real big split there. Now look, like, Sean Clifford's gone, and I'm sure there are Penn State fans that are viewing that as a positive. I'm not going to argue it's not. I think Clifford, people hate it. So there's something I go back and forth with in messages on Twitter and talk to occasionally that hates it when you call somebody a gamer. I mean, Clifford was in the sense of, he doesn't have like the best skill set. He's very competitive. He generally made pretty good decisions. And I think often when they call someone a gamer, and I mean that about Clifford, has just enough athleticism to like make it exciting. That was Clifford to a T. I do think that in particular, with Drew Allar, who I think they're quite excited about, a drop back passer. He's got a big arm. Coming in and taking over, I think they're excited about the potential of like uncorking the offense a bit. They have a really good running back that they're quite excited about as well. Allar, though, he's got some, he had some training wheels on when he was in last season. He's going to have another year under his belt. He's not going to be a true freshman. He only completed 58.3% of his passes, 5.7 per. Again, training wheels with that. But just to give you an idea, like the very best quarterbacks in college football are completing around 65% or better of their passes and hitting north of 8.5, closer to 9 yards per attempt. And Allar's going to need some help. The offensive line wasn't great last season, 2.73 in line yards per Football Outsiders. Now, this is an advanced-ish metric. It attempts to divvy up credit on the rushing yards between the offensive line and the running backs. 2.73 was good for number 60 overall per Penn State in that metric. I do think that they're going to need to improve on the offensive line coming into this season. They had a 4.9% sack rate. That was good for number 38 overall. That's also going to have to improve. Now, that's a quarterback metric. I know that people often blame sacks on the offensive line. That can be true. You can also blame some sacks on wide receivers not getting open. That can also be true. But it's often quarterbacks holding the football. Allar needs to get the ball out. They need to cut down on the sack rate. That will cut down on their negative drives. They're number 100 overall in returning production, 55% coming back. It's not an automatic that they're going to like make a big leap forward. Yurcich has had some really good offenses in the past. He's a really well-regarded offensive mind, I think, in college football. But it's been a while since he really had one of his best offenses. When he went to Ohio State, he wasn't calling plays. And it's only since he's come back to Penn State. If you think back to those Oklahoma State offenses, that was a while ago, that he was there, probably having his best years. This is his year to come back and prove it too. And I think you are quite likely to see improvement. I just think it's not as if when we look at number 21 overall here and how much they have coming back, that you look at them and it's like a given. The USC defense was so bad last season, the team that we just covered, you are almost assured to see improvement because the floor, they were just so bad. They should just be more talent. They are more talented than they played. It's not as easy. Once you get to this, making that jump that Penn State made last season from 70 to 21 is easier when you're the Penn States of the world. You have good players relative to other teams, right? You shouldn't be at 70. If you find yourself there, something has gone very, very wrong. And if you just fix the very, very wrong, it should be pretty obvious what to fix, then you can make big improvement. And they did. it's a harder jump from 21 to 10 or 21 to 5 or 10 to 5, right? Like those start to get like, you have to start getting most everything right at that point. And I think Penn State can do it. And I think this team has real upside coming into the season. But we're not projecting them into the top 10 this year, even though they finished at 9 last year, partly because the offense just isn't returning a ton and the offensive line needs some help, and they might need some help at receiver too. Just something to keep an eye on. The defensive side of the football, I got to eat some crow. Manny Diaz is your defensive coordinator. I said last year when Manny Diaz was hired, taking over for Brent Pry, who done a terrific job and gotten the head coaching job at Virginia Tech. I said that I wasn't sure. I mean, look, there's only so many great defensive coordinators out there. Manny Diaz used to be one of them, so why not take a flyer on him? But I didn't think Manny Diaz when he took up play calling at Miami, the Canes still weren't good on defense. When he, it had been a while since he'd been a really good defensive coordinator. And I was somewhat skeptical that he could hold it together on what had been the engine of Penn State, right? I mean, their defense was number 8 and 21 under Pry. They were better, and I got to eat some crow. Diaz was really, really good. I was wrong. I admit it. But so now we know, and that's exciting because they return a lot on this side of the ball off a really, really good defense. Now, these are scaled not to the best defense. These are scaled to the best offense because this is in the era of modern college football. Offense is going to get you further than defense most years, unless you're like 21 Georgia. So this number, I do want to convey to people that if you put the number 4 defense up against the number 1 offense, that defense can give up some points still. Right. So this is scaled. Georgia's offense is it's sort of reverse scaled into where Georgia's offense would be here. Georgia's offense would put up some points against Penn State. That's not an indictment saying this isn't a good defense. It's just the way modern college football works. Number 16 overall in drive efficiency. They did a pretty good job overall using the field to their advantage and finding ways to get off the field and not give up points. They did a good job here at number 10 in explosive drives. It's very hard for defenses to control big plays. It is the world of big plays in college football. Everybody is pretty good at putting up big plays. And in fact, if you look at the distribution, if you plotted the distribution of offensive explosive drives, it is far more linear, right? Like you're going to have a pretty steep fall off in drive efficiency than the teams that are very, very good at it to the teams that are just merely pretty good at it. And the same goes for negative drives. But they do I think, but number 10, like almost everybody's going to find a way to put up big plays. They did a good job of containing them. Number 4 overall in play efficiency. They did a good job outside of explosives, containing yards per play. Number 1 in negative drives. This is a terrific number. They did a great job finding ways to put the offense in bad situations, sacks, turnovers, 3 and outs. Like they did a really, really good job here. Turning things to their advantage. Number 6 overall in effective rush, 7 in effective pass. Just an excellent overall defense. No glaring weaknesses whatsoever. They were at number 34 overall in creating disruptive plays last season. That's good for number 3 overall. When you control for now, that is an unadjusted metric. You give you an idea of they put up some good numbers against some decent offenses. They're number 1 in negative drives from number 3 in disruptive plays. Now they were, and this talks a little bit to that drive efficiency number where it sits at 16. They gave up a first down on third down 33% of the time, and that was good for 22 overall. That's a number that's going to have to improve next year. That's going to have to get better. They're number 24 in Bill Connelling's returning production coming into this season. That's good for number 75 overall, or 75%. That's good for 75% coming back. That's a great number for them. Manny Diaz is back. You just got to really like. I think you got to really like this defense to have another really, really good year and be the engine and backbone, that they might be able to build on, if they can get some offensive improvement from the special teams. All right. Penn State is playing an FCS team, so add 1. That'll get you to almost 9 wins in the projection and 6 in conference. Look, I mean, I think when we talk about this Penn State team, I think one of the things that we're most interested to see, of course, is like where the offense sits, right? Now, when they get to play West Virginia to start out the season, I'm not all that high on, I don't think I'm alone here on West Virginia. Penn State should be a fairly significant favorite in this game at home, even though it's a rivalry game. I don't know that we're going to learn a ton about Penn State here, but it is a very good opportunity to get to see them against Power 5 competition early on, and that shouldn't hurt. Penn State, what you'd like to see them do here, if they're going to beat this projection, is beat this naive spread. Even though, I mean, and I will say, like, we are going to see a little less scoring in college football. They've cut, the rules changes will cut down on the number of drives by probably about 1 per team. That'll lead to somewhere between 2.5 and 3 points coming off the board for each team. But you'd like to see Penn State win by closer to 17, more than 2 touchdowns for sure. Illinois, this is where things I think get interesting. I do like the hires that Bielema has made. I like his offensive coordinator hire. I think they have for what I think Bielema, what he wants to do. I think they have a chance to be interesting and good. But they do lose their terrific defensive coordinator, off to be the head coach at Purdue, Ryan Walters. I still think Illinois' defense should be decent, and this is where we're going to get to see like the first of 2 games in a row where we're going to get an idea about where Penn State's offense is. And for Alar, like you're going to get thrown into the fire pretty quick here. You get a little bit of a warm up against West Virginia, then I think you get the FCS game in there. But then you're going to have to face an Illinois team that has some good players. And I think even if they're not as good as when they had Walters, when they were the number 2 overall defense last season, I think they should still be a very good defense in the top 20. Then you're going to get an Iowa team. And I think Phil Parker is one of the most underrated coaches. I mean, he has carried Kirk Ferentz for years, as Ferentz has continued to employ his goof off son as the offensive coordinator. He's going to we're going to learn a lot about this Penn State team against Iowa. Iowa is, and this is, man, if there's anybody that's going to benefit from this like slowdown rule in college football, it's going to be frickin' Iowa. Hope to increase the, influence of turnovers on the game by limiting the number of drives. Might help the Hawkeyes a little bit. But this should be if Penn State's unable to move the ball here, this could be a really brutal watch. Penn State's favorite here, but if they were to finish -2 on turnovers, they could easily lose this game, even though Iowa's offense has been horrid under Ferentz the younger. I do think Penn State, like the thing to watch here, of course, they should win this game, barring totally face planting and turning the ball over. Their defense is plenty good enough to shut down Iowa. But it is, what can their offense do? Like a good offense in modern college football, like I talked about, is going to put up points even against a very good defense. Penn State needs to show up and actually put up some points on Iowa here. I'm not saying that they're going to win by a lot, but they need to put some distance between them and Iowa. If they beat their projections, you're probably talking about close to 10 points. Northwestern is a totally hapless mess. Penn State should absolutely blow them out. Same goes for Massachusetts, even though I like Don Brown a lot as a coach, and I do think eventually he will figure things out a little bit on the defensive side of the ball anyway. Then you get the showdown against Ohio State in the horseshoe. This should be a really fun one. I think Penn State just has a knack of like bringing it, particularly on defense, and flummoxing the Buckeyes. I think this matchup should be really good, in that Ohio State's defense under Knowles should continue to improve. They were in the top 20 last season. I expect them to be in the top 10 this season. That's trouble for Penn State, though. This is where, what we find out against Illinois and what we find out against Iowa, and then are they able to continue to sharpen up against Northwestern and Massachusetts is really going to matter. because they're going to have to match what Ohio State is likely to do. I mean, look, Penn State can throw all the wrinkles out there you want. The Buckeyes have still usually found a way to put up points and win the game. You don't expect Ohio State to always have one of their worst offensive games of the season against Penn State. I don't think you can quite count on that. So I think for Penn State, like, this is the game where the offense is going to have to come in and be able to shine, going to have to be able to do some things against, again, like what I think under Knowles is like, they're sort of like the mirror image of this Penn State team, you know, in the sense that like Ohio State's offense has been pretty good. They were really good last season. They weren't great last year. The Ohio State's defense, I think, is going to be in the realm to like give Penn State some trouble. And they've been in that realm the last couple seasons because Penn State's offense has been so bad. Alara needs to figure it out. Like, they need to find a way here. If Ohio State's offense is really clicking, then this game could be really real trouble for them. I mean, Ohio State's offense has not been above that sort of 2 marker in beta rank since 2019. We keep talking about, like, I think Ohio State made a really good offensive line coach hire a couple years ago that they needed to make. The results haven't quite shown up on the field yet. But I do think that this Ohio State team, if they can get back to running the ball effectively too, which is much more Day's bread and butter, I think they can have a really, really good offense. If that's the case, this game could get a little bit out of reach for Penn State. But I think this, it's going to be around a touchdown because I think both of these teams have the possibility to beat their projections. Indiana, Penn State should absolutely get right through Indiana in all likelihood. Maryland is an interesting one. Offensively, of course, Maryland's a lot of fun. But it is, I'm not massively, I don't love the offensive coordinator hire at Maryland, to be frank. I wasn't all that sold on Gaddis at Michigan. He was awful at just awful at Miami. Loxley's likely still going to have a huge hand in calling plays, and that should keep things going for them. That makes this kind of an interesting matchup. Maryland's kind of a fun, quirky team that can get up there and surprise you. Penn State is better though. And, again, like, even though it's on the road, Penn State should be able to put it together against Maryland. But if this is the kind of game where a bad turnover could really cost you. Then we come to Michigan. Like, look, Michigan projects to be really good on the defensive side of the football. Again, a little quixotic on the offense. We talked about that a little bit. I don't expect, like, Michigan is one of those like very high floor but low ceiling potential teams that might really benefit from Georgia and Alabama and going out and not hiring the world's greatest offensive coordinators. So I think Michigan is a team that, as we talk about and come into the season, like Penn State, the offense is going to need to step up because Michigan's been really consistent. This is a game where by this time in the season, we're going to know a lot about Penn State's offense. We're going to know if they're going to be able to handle this. What this spread looks like when we get there is going to tell you where they think this is going to be. I think Penn State's defense can slow down Michigan's offense and make this a bit of a grudge match. It's just, can Penn State's offense put enough together in this game? I think this, again, like, it's like the Ohio State game. This should be a really fun, really good game. Rutgers, this one shouldn't be terribly close. And Michigan State, look, I like the defensive coordinator hire that Mel Tucker made. I think he made a really bad offensive coordinator hire. I think that's largely shown through. I think Penn State could be favored by as much as 14 by the time we come to this game. I mean, I do want to say, like, I think Penn State's offense is going to beat where they were last year overall at 21. The question is, by how much? Whoop. So that's the Nittany Lions. Look, I mean, this should be a really fun year, I think, for Penn State, right? Like, they took the big necessary step that they needed to last year on the offensive side of the football. They got a quarterback that they're really excited about, but doesn't have a ton of experience that's coming in. They've got an offensive coordinator that I think that they believe in, that guided them to much better play last season. If they could put all that together, turn the corner, and get into the top 10 offensively, they should be fine. Unless Ohio State absolutely turns it on offensively, I think they should be fine and should be competing, in a three-legged race, if you will, or a 3-team race for the Big Ten title, between Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State. I think all of that can happen. Where where Penn State could run into trouble is the offense doesn't take that leap. They drop a game they really shouldn't along the way, putting them behind the 8 ball with Ohio State and Michigan, and then they just can't keep up. You know, they drop a dumb game to Iowa. They could drop a dumb game to Maryland or something like that. Teams that are close enough to potentially give them trouble, especially with fewer drives available to them. You know, smaller sample leads to greater influence of randomness when randomness happens. And part of why we like football is randomness. Anyway, this should be a really fun season. I think we talked about early on, like keep an eye on the early games against Illinois and then Iowa. It's going to give you an idea where the offense is. Even if they struggle, I wouldn't close the door on them because they are going to have some time to sharpen up before they get to Ohio State, but that's when they got to really show up. That's when they're going to have a really good game. And not just leave the defense to every year have the best year of their lives against the Buckeyes. Anyway, this should be like this. The Big Ten it's a little deeper than it's been. I think Maryland stepping up makes them a little deeper than they've been. You know, but it's still pretty top heavy. But Penn State, I think, you know, like is sneaking into this year a little bit under the radar, if you will, with the potential to be a really good team. And challenge. I think everybody's focused on Ohio State and Michigan. And I think Penn State could potentially come in a little bit under the radar because I think they made the big step and, you know, it's a hard, I talked about a very, very hard step to get up into that top 10, but I think they could do it. All right. Who do I got next? I'm going backpacking in Montana. So I will not be doing previews for a little bit. Oh, come on. Don't do that. Apologies. Oh, next is Florida. All right. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find all the stats you just saw and a whole lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. You can find me at BetaRankFB and at Sharp College Football. We have a Pac-12 podcast for like another year, 12 Pack Radio. You can find all the back episodes of that at sharpcollegefootball.com/12 Pack Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. When I get